out of all my other applications so that I don't incur some terrible feedback revenge.
Yeah, not a problem. Not a problem.
All right.
Well, I guess we'll take a minute to welcome everybody. This is our first official guest speaker of the University of St. Augustine's Business, Entrepreneurs, and Private Practice Student Special Interest Group. As of yesterday, Jose, we are officially official?
Yep.
Sanctioned by the university? That's awesome, man. I'm pumped. This is it. This is the first one. So, I'm excited to have a dear friend of mine and one of the best in the business, Dr. Ben Fung, on to talk to you tonight. I'll turn it over to Jose. This is your show, man. Run with it.
Awesome. Thank you, Dr. Phil. Thank you, Dr. Ben Fung, for being here. And then also, shout out to everybody that's here right now. It is our first meeting. As you can tell, we're all a little bit excited. But I mean, we have multiple cohorts present. We got some residential, some flex students in the house. We already have some Miami, St. Augustine campus people aware of our meeting. I'm sure there's a few in here. And then we also got some strength coaches, that I felt could benefit from this talk. So there's a lot of people here in attendance. Thank you for everyone for showing out. And just to introduce Dr. Ben Fung, he's got a ton of physical therapy experience. He is the CEO of UpDoc Media. And really, I'm just going to let him take the floor now because I'm sure we all want to hear from him. Thank you, everybody. Dr. Fung, the floor is yours.
All right, guys. Hello. So Ben Fung, I'm a PT out of San Diego, and took a rather weird way to get here, truth be told. I was a bioengineer before I became a PT. And I was like a surf bum, bartender, soul searcher between those two things until the clinic I was volunteering at basically told me to apply for a job and get a real one and then eventually become a full-fledged therapist. In between all of that, or after it rather, I ended up getting a master in business from the University of Michigan. And then went on to found a couple of companies. Right now, the three primary entities I'm involved with is UpDoc Incorporated, which a lot of people know for stuff like the Job Market Pulse or the talent acquisition reports that we take from like a pure data collection narrative analysis view, plus the open sourced aspect of what normal pay can and should be and what people are looking for in terms of retaining and acquiring talent. The other two entities I work with are both based in Maryland. They're both clinic operations. One's a fitness clinic hybrid called Recharge, Modern Health and Fitness, and the other one is Restore Pelvic Health and Physical Therapy. There's a lot of different titles that float around in between all those. A lot of them start with, a chief this or that, or a co-founder this or that. What it really means is if there's any job that needs to be done, I'm probably going to be the one that has a hand in it. And there's no job that's, necessarily below me. And if I can offload my team members as much as I possibly can, then that's what I like to do. So my understanding is today is going to be a little bit more of a free flow type talk. I didn't, get any slide deck ready or anything of that nature, just because half the time when that occurs, people just read off of the they just read off of the slides, and I don't find that to be engaging in the least. There's a lot of data that I can share in terms of what you can expect coming into the job market, as well as plenty of stories and experiences and advice that I can share in what we see work best from an evidence-based standpoint in terms of business entrepreneurship within the clinical and healthcare space. I think that's really all I had as an opening in general. I guess, Scott, please, corral me if I get a little bit out of control.
Yeah, we like the out of control, man. We encourage that. So have at it.
Very good. In general, I usually will kind of get this off the ground in saying, at least on the salary part, and then we can kind of really dive deep into some of the business and career development things. I don't know how many of you guys have been exposed to the angry seasoned clinician. You know, it seems to be a thing. You know, usually they're the ones that like to scare the students for the first rotation in the clinic and all that kind of stuff. And it's like it's an archetype of old that I'm glad to say doesn't exist as much anymore. But that same type of persona tends to also be the ones that are very supportive of students until they graduate. And then once they graduate, for whatever reason,
What's up, bro?
it's like,
210? Yeah.
hi. I guess a lot of people are jumping on. You know, it just all of a sudden at that moment, your competition or something. It's like, okay, now that you graduate, now you got your license, now you have to work at the bottom of the totem pole, which is a little bit ironic because the new grad is thinking, you just taught me everything you know, supposedly. It gave me really good marks on my clinical review for the affiliation, but all of a sudden now that I've learned everything that you have to teach me in this short stint of time, I'm also now worthless. It's just this weird dichotomy. And so then it comes to like, well, then what is reasonable pay and what can you expect coming out of the job market? And then how do you go about the salary negotiations and then the career climbing after that? So I can tell you that if you actually, I'll put it in the chat right now. If you guys haven't seen it, you can go to updocmedia.com/job market pulse. And you know, this is a database that I personally run. It's many thousands of data points old. It's like 6-7 years or so in the making with various additions. And we're about to release the 2022 kind of quote new year, like early part of the year release on the heels of CSM. And essentially this trends out by state, by specialty, setting, experience factors. Sometimes a specific zip code, if there's enough folks that drop it in there in the raw data, that you can actually find for yourself what a reasonable pay can be in the areas that you're looking at. It's a very powerful database. You do have to sign up for it. So the cost is your email and potentially getting spammed from yours truly, which honestly, I don't even remember the last time I sent an email out. So it's usually pretty few and far between unless we're inviting folks to sign up for a survey or add data to the survey database. From there, one of the things you should really appreciate is the fact that there is a trickle down effect in our industry, right? Our clinicians are part of organizations, whether they're small solo private practices or they're big hospital divisions, and they get reimbursed or paid or get revenue from having the license and giving skilled care, right? And they do all the Medicare and billing and insurance stuff or not. If you do out of network, you know, that's fine too, or cash, whatever the case is, right? You generate money, and then a portion of that money needs to be used to keep the lights on and you know, for work comp insurance and all that kind of stuff. And there's all these different enumerated costs of overhead. And then the quote remainder is split between company profits and the cost of labor. And so there's a big question of what that cost of labor should be. But before we even get there, we actually have to understand how much we actually get reimbursed. That's something that you can actually look at the PT payer report too. Actually, I'll find that for you guys too. The nice thing about being able to do this all at the same time. I think the latest one, it's slightly old. Looks like it's the summer data pool from 2020. I'm gonna put this in the chat as well. Oh, it looks like the other one didn't fully push through. So I'll try to find that for you guys. And actually there's probably a summer update for the pulse that gives you a little better view of what that can be. The realities is this: there's an incredible regional effect when it comes to how clinicians get reimbursed based on setting and based on geographical location. And that's fairly well outlined in the pulse as well as in the payer report. The key idea is this: depending on where you work, you may very well be reimbursed $250 per visit. Other places might barely break $70 per visit. So if you're thinking about that as a percentage of what a company can afford, or maybe what you can afford to pay yourself, if you're gonna go into private practice and then pay your team, that changes the lens a little bit. You know, for wherever they're getting $250 per visit, like I want to live and work there, right? Like that's the place to go. And for the most part, Minnesota typically leads that charge. And you know, the race to the bottom, depending on the state, really just depends. And there's even regions within the regions of each state. So like there's pockets of, say, New Jersey that pay very, very well. There's pockets of New Jersey that pay very, very poorly. New York City pays very, very well. Upstate New York, awful. right? I wouldn't want to open a practice in Pennsylvania. I wouldn't necessarily want to open up a practice in some of the suburbs of Chicago, because in Illinois, it's a very strict and constrained practice act, and there's other things to consider with there. So in those states, you can necessarily expect that the reciprocal percentage going to the clinician is going to be quite a bit lower. Similarly with setting. Now, that was just for outpatient. You know, for inpatient, that depends on if you're working at a for-profit or not-for-profit hospital or facility, agency, that kind of stuff. And it also depends on what their split is with the rest of the team. So for those of you interested in acute care, that's my clinical roots. Typically, rehab services is actually seen as a kind of a cost of doing business, because for the most part, unless it is in the emergency department or short stay observations or it's wound care, for the most part, the way the hospital will code for that stay is based on the admission. So enumerated representation for what you're billing in the hospital. That's just so that the hospital can track that you're actually doing your job, since they can't follow you from room to room and floor to floor. And that said, sometimes the chunk of that is enormous, like the maybe an image worth $40,000. So then rehab services might get 10% of that or something of that nature, depending on how much clout the upper management of rehab services have and how they politically maneuver their departments within the talks with the C-suite and the director of finance and that kind of stuff. And so for those situations, usually what you see is those organizations will pay more or less than the average, but they'll try to keep you by giving you extremely luscious health benefits, and sometimes even a matched retirement plan and even a pension plan. Classically for home health, you get the most bang for your buck, but you're also driving a lot. And you have to manage your own caseload, so some people don't like that. PEDS is kind of a bimodal, where some places PEDS pays really, really, really well. There's not so great. It's almost like the luxury tax or the sunshine tax for like Hawaii. Like, you know, it's a very expensive place to live, and you can't really make that much money, but you are living in Hawaii, right? So it's kind of like you get to play with kids, so you're not going to get paid that much. So there's always that kind of dynamic there. Inpatient SNF used to be very, very lucrative. That's changing a little bit because historically speaking, there's quite a bit of organizations that got caught billing the way they probably should have been. And there's news stories on that we can talk about as well. And so on. So how that trickles down to the new grad and throughout the career development is, for the most part, a new grad can expect, this is where it's crazy, can expect somewhere in the mid $70,000 per year, plus or minus $18,000 to $20,000, which is insane. That's like a 20% standard deviation. So that means that a fair offer where you are could be $85,000. It could be $59,000. It just depends on where you are. And that's where I tend to say, look, if we're trying to be science-minded folk, 5% is that magic rule. So really there is no norm for our salaries. The salary is what you decide that you want to value yourself at, and what your life circumstances allow you to say yes or no to. And too often what ends up happening is new grads, without much content or coaching or training like you're receiving now, you get scared because you're thinking, man, somebody else is just going to take that. I better just say yes is coming about. But that hasn't been true for a very long time. Just by show of either virtual or physical hands, how many of you guys have heard of that term called the Great Resignation? Fair amount, right? Typically, any industry in the United States will have about a 15% turnover. Right now, healthcare is 20 to 30%. So it is a talent marketplace for sure. Now, not every organization is struggling with this. This happens in pockets and in cycles. And you can see this stuff too. Like if you've interned or affiliated at a place where everyone there seems to be a 20-year PT, they're all going to retire at the same time. And that place is going to have a lot of HR problems in filling those patient schedules when that time comes, right? Those that have kind of well-distributed or a diversified career life cycle for their human resources, they won't struggle as much, because as one retires, somebody else can be brought in. As somebody moves, or they have life circumstances or maybe professional circumstances that changes their interest, somebody else can come in, versus like a mass exodus, which is happening more and more and more. So that's kind of the first message of never settle. Yeah, 75,000 plus or minus 20,000. Crazy. Um, but it's up to you, and we can talk about strategies of how you can negotiate that. But the number one thing is you have to come in with that knowledge, right? And if you download the pulse and you look at the report, you'll know what normal is near you, plus or minus $20,000. And that way, when somebody goes, hey, so our new grad rate's about $55,000 a year, and you've researched your zip code and you're supposed to be getting something like 79, you know, you can play a little hardball with that offer, you know, and a lot of savvy employers want you to bargain. They don't want you to just lay down, because there's that relational maxim of what you will do for somebody, you will do to them, right? If you are willing to advocate for yourself in this job interview, then I am more willing to believe that you will advocate for this entity, for this organization, when you're a part of it. There's a lot of that kind of soft skill buy-in that is a big deal when it comes to interview and salary negotiations, and being able to hold your ground in some of these things. And there's also offers that are too good to be true, and there's been a lot of those popping up lately. That's actually, here's another thing. We run something at UpDoc called the Corporate Quality Index. That is an open source, again, and anonymous, so it's safe. You're not exposed to anything. It's a survey of multifactorial employer qualities. So it's not just like out of 10 stars or out of 5 stars, how happy am I with the employer? It digs into, say, organizational culture, or are they a responsible corporate citizen, which a lot of times translates to, are they billing in a way that I feel is ethical, right? Versus legal. You know, do they value their workers, and can I trust my manager? Like, so all of those things can put into play. So, you know, I know that I'm shamelessly putting out my reports out there, but it's free, and B, it's stuff that I wish I had as a new grad. So it's there for you guys. You can use it or not. The last bit I would say translates into the career development stage. There's a lot of folks that say it takes you about 5 years to get your footing. Yeah, maybe. Time to me is a vehicle for value. It is not valuable by itself. Let's think about billing terms, right? If I'm doing ultrasound, or if I'm doing unattended eStim for 8 minutes, it's not a very valuable proposition, both financially or for the patient. But if I'm doing, say, neuromuscular reeducation or evidence-based manual therapy for those 8 minutes, all of a sudden it's actually very valuable, both financially as well as to the patient. And to me as a clinician, because there's only so many times I can wave a magic wand hoping somebody will believe it before I stop believing in myself. So all of that has to be put into consideration. So with that, I don't think it necessarily takes 5 years. I feel like it's all about quality, not quantity. It's about the quality of the years on the mat as much as it is the time in industry. And you'll see a lot of this, especially in continuing education courses that focuses on like the newer evidence, especially in differential diagnosis. That's usually where you see a lot of the younger, and I mean younger as in younger in your career. There's a lot of DPT students that are in their 50s and they're like 4th or 5th career path. I met plenty of those folk and warmly welcome them as colleagues in the private practice section. And it's just what they feel is their right path, and that's what they want to do with their lives, despite them having to take a second mortgage on their house to do school. You know, it's just, there's that kind of colleague in part of our industrial makeup. And, you know, for them, when they take a look out there, they have plenty of that experience, even though they're young in their PT career. That 1 or 2 years in, they also bring in all sorts of other life experience. They might have been a senior vice president for something and has that acumen. So, you know, this, again, my encouragement to you guys, not to feel small, not to settle, but to realize that there's an incredible amount of uniqueness and innovative charge that new grads come with. You know, I remember back in 2013, I was talking with a bunch of new grads at the San Diego CSM, and I was telling them, guys, like, you know way more than I do, like way more. You know, my DPT was very different than yours. In fact, I kind of don't want to show my DPT around yours because you know so much more than I do now, right? And that's a compliment as well. I know Dr. Field can vouch for this. As an educator, that's how it should be. right? Each subsequent iteration of the teaching and learning process should be better. If we're only teaching the same stuff that we learned 50 years ago, then gosh, like we've done really poorly for the educational process and the profession. So it can be what it needs to be. And it doesn't have to be 5 years. It can be 5 months. It can be 5 weeks. You know, I knew that I was ready to move on and move upward within the first 9 months. I was a new grad because I was doing stuff at that time that people that were in part of the hospital for over 20 years have yet to achieve, right? I was being featured on local news stations and I was the first person in that department to ever be done so. And I don't feel like that's necessarily a coincidence. I think it has a lot to do with perspective and drive, a little bit of luck, maybe a luck, and a lot less. Well, it took me 20 years to get here when it really took me 9 months. And then when it comes to opening your own practice, that's a whole nother can of worms that we can definitely dive into. Bottom line is you have to realize that nothing about opening business or being an entrepreneur, which are slightly separate things, is comfortable. Many times you're losing more money than you're making. Many times you're paying yourself less than you're paying your employees. And that's just how it starts, because doing this has more to do with how you live your life, how you control the 24 hours you have every single day versus, you know, making millions and millions and millions of dollars. There are ways to get there. Some are more ethical than others, and some are more efficient than others. You'll get there faster or slower. And I remember a professor told me way back in the day, you know, like there's one time where he built and sold a bunch of clinics as a single practice package. And it took him like, you know, many, many, many years. Other times it took him like 2 or 3 years, and he just kind of made a career out of doing that. The one that made him the most money was the 2 or 3 years, but that also cost him a second house on the mortgage and like no sleep whatsoever for those 2 to 3 years, and a very rocky patch of his family life. So it all comes from somewhere, right? The bill will eventually come due. It's on you to decide how you want to spend those precious seconds. So that's my diatribe. Let's have some discussion and some questions. I'm yours until we can't take it anymore, or until my family can't take it anymore for Lunar New Year.
Right. Well, Ben, real quick, before we open it up to questions, could you give maybe a brief summary of a couple of things to look for when interviewing for a job, and a couple maybe red flags to avoid?
Sure. I'm going to, again, link some stuff, and I'll talk specifically through some of the things to look through. So I'm going to link something called the Ultimate Student Resource Collection. It's the original post was from 2016. We've updated it since 2019, but I think actually even 2020. So bing, there you go.
And guys, this is all stuff that I also wish that I had when I was going through PT school or beyond. I mean, like, this stuff just didn't exist. So
it really didn't. And it was so hush hush, and like you weren't allowed to talk about it. You were considered weird or disrespectful. I'm very, very glad the culture of transparency is more well integrated within our society now. And there's actually evidence on that as well. There's a lot of HR resource stuff coming out of very well-regarded business programs and economic institutes showing that wage literacy and transparency actually leads to better pay for everybody and leads to a more profitable organization. There's all sorts of, like, I could really go on a rant on that one. Big time. But things to look out for. If you go in there, I think there's like 10 interview questions that you need to ask or something of that nature. And things you really want to look out for, again, is what they will do for you, they will do to you. And that's honestly key in life. I mean, you could apply that to your, like, relationships, because that's really what it is, right? Like, an employment relationship is a relationship, and you're, for the better part, married to that relationship for the duration, because you're probably going to spend more time thinking and doing that work than maybe even at home, depending on the type of work and where you live. So it's very important to think about. One I already mentioned, right, is everybody in the resource or the talent pool in the same exact work life cycle? If they are, consider it, right? Like, it could be good, it could be bad. Like, it could be a very quick way to jump up the ladder. If everybody's about to retire, guess who's in line, you know, to get promoted? At the same time, if everybody there is a new grad and they only hire new grads, then they're probably burning through new grads. So you have to watch out for that. If everybody there seems to only be 10 to 15 year in, then they have a very, very expensive human resource pool. So they're probably going to low you because they can't afford to pay their their clinicians as it is. I think 12 years is like the epitome of pay for most PTs. Is for whatever reason the job market just kind of prescribes it there. When you reach 12 years, people just pay you a lot. But then after that, it's hard for you to really make incremental moves. In fact, people start to lowball you because under their breath, they'll insinuate that you're outdated. And I remember so clearly a heartbreaking story out in Virginia when I was speaking on a circuit there with a clinician who's 15 years in and just so accomplished and just had issues getting any reasonable offer at all. So there's that as well. Other things to look out for are sneaky employers like me. So when I was a corporate director, I would secret shop people. So I would have aides look for how you park, how you went through the front door. I would have a family member I knew I could count on kind of pretend like they're a new registrant and see if the candidate's willing to jump in and help. Because again, what you do for somebody, to them. If you're willing to help this person, you're not getting paid. You're going to do that at my clinic or at my hospital and help like the lost family member figure out what's going on when you are on the clock. And that's the kind of team member I want. Other things to look out for also are just like zero flex type negotiation tactics coming from the wrong source. So certain organizations like the VA, some not-for-profit hospitals, they just can't flex. They have very, like the military, for example, has a very strict pay grade. And for better or worse, it's actually very fair, right? The time in service and experience over, experience within the organization will lead to like a matrix of how much you can get paid. And that's just how it works. And it doesn't really flex up or down that much, but it's there, right? Everybody gets treated the same. Some other organizations, say like a private practice, we're saying, no, that's it. That's our new grad rate. I would just get out of there. I wouldn't even think about that. Mostly because if they're taking that posture, then what happens when, say, you want to start a family? Maybe you have a death in the family and you want to go to a family reunion. Maybe you want to take some time off for yourself, travel around the world when we're allowed to again, like that kind of stuff. Whatever the case is, if they're not flexing then, and you're not even bespoke to them, right? Like you have signed nothing. What happens when you do? The other thing to look out for too is, depending on the state you want to work for or work in, certain states have a completely unenforceable non-compete clauses. First off, I would never sign one. It's insane to even think about signing one unless you're going to be in a very high level role, right? Because the idea of a non-compete clause historically in Western common law is that would protect an intellectual or strategic property group of the employer entity so that you can just turn around and rip them off and then they would have business. But that's not such a thing for clinicians. There's nothing that we do within any organization that is truly proprietary in nature, right? Because that actually is proprietary to my license, your license, right? So nobody should have control over that. There are, like, Idaho is one state just because they have very low population. I think Wyoming has certain weird ones as well. So the lower population places tend to have that where it's very not in the favor of the workforce. California, completely unenforceable. I could job hop all I want and nobody could stop me, right? Like that's the thing. Illinois, a little sketchy, but just be careful. Some of them make sense, like especially if you're privy to certain data, like say health data, and you were brought on as like a program lead for a wellness thing, and they have a really big multi-million-dollar contract with a payer, then okay, let's look at the terms of that non-compete clause and how long that term's out, right? If it's just during the time and then 1 year after, and I can only work in non-population health things, then sure, that's a fair thing because that prevents me from sniping all of your clients and contracts in the first year that I quit. But if it's something like, oh, you can't even work in the next 10-mile radius for the next 5 years, well, if you're working in New Jersey, then you're moving to New York, right? So that's not fair and that's not right. And a lot of that's just, again, unenforceable. Other things to look out for is, and maybe not look out for, but to take advantage of is probationary period. So a lot of places will hire you in as a probationary period. Some of them will do a preceptorship. So what will happen is they'll kind of treat you like an intern. And you'll follow a clinician lead for a prorated period of time. They'll pay you in a prorated period of time as you learn things in home health. And once you build a full caseload, then you get your full-time pay equivalent. Until then, you get that like kind of partition pay. At the same time, you get to kind of dig into the organization and be like, are they doing everything in the way I would? and I'd be, pleased to share with Santa Claus, right? Like, and if I am, then awesome, right? I can respect myself for working here. If it's a little sketchy, that's a great time to be like, you know what? Not a great fit. People are like quintuple booking Medicare here and billing full units, and I'm just not going to be a part of this. And that's actually a whole nother topic point. I'm not the best expert to talk about this on, but like there's a whole other financial deal to whistleblowing, which is very much protected in healthcare, and you don't get in trouble for. And a lot of times we don't even know. That's another topic to talk about. Is like, how do you question the authority and make them validate for you that things are going okay, right? And I'm not trying to insinuate that all of these employees are or employers are out there out to get you. In fact, the data most recently since pandemic shows the opposite. They actually really care. Like most employers very much care about their workforce as their number one priority. But that again, a lot of it has to do with bad processes, bad ways of communicating between management tiers and workforce. One final warning I would say has to do with just general turnover rates. We kind of mentioned it before with like, if it's all new grad populations, like that's probably not a great sign, unless there's a good reason for it, right? There's a brand new clinic chain. We're just growing. That's fine. But if it's like the same place over and over again, they've been around there for like 30 years and they just burn through people like every 6 to 15 months, then you probably don't even want to bother signing in there. And that's also pretty common with like a clinic director or like a rehab director or director of rehab at a skilled nursing facility. Is if you're burning through these roles every 9 to 15 months, then you probably don't want to go there.
Well, that is a solid list. Some great information. Let's open it up to questions. Anybody have any questions? Fire away.
Yeah, I had a question.
Sorry, go ahead.
Sorry, I don't know who that was. But it was a quick one. You kind of lost me on the probationary period.
Mm-hmm.
So are you saying this is something in that interview process that we can kind of ask for to kind of try out the job?
Some places will have it embedded in their like onboarding process of a new hire. So they will say, oh, okay, well, for new grads, we have this onboarding system where you're in a 60-day probationary period. You can leave for any reason. We can fire you for any reason. And actually, most states are an at-will employment state, which means you can leave for any reason. They can fire you for any reason. No need to, like, there's no need for notice. Like the 2-week notice thing is very much Hollywood. That doesn't exist in most states on a legal level. Professionally speaking, it's fair etiquette. I don't feel that it's necessary. And it just, again, it just depends on the conditions thereof. But that said, to answer your question more directly, it really has to do with employers that have found benefit in slowly bringing their new hires into a full caseload, depending on the setting and the specialty. You can ask about it. You can go, hey, look, I was wondering, do you guys have any kind of preceptorship or probationary period for new hires? Maybe you can save a little money. I can suss out the situation. I can build up a full caseload in a more stress-free environment. That way I'm efficient, you're efficient, and we're all very happy. And that just sets everybody up for success. Some will say, boy, that's a great idea. Would you like to pilot it? Because they probably haven't thought about it before. Others will say, oh yeah, we have this, or we just don't. We need somebody that can take a caseload like tomorrow. And just be wary of that. I would push back on that. I mean, there's very few clinicians I know that can jump into a full caseload at a brand new clinic or a brand new employer, despite the setting being the same. And really jump in and just have no problem with it. It's a rare composition. Usually you're pretty in over your head, no matter what the case is, for the first week or two.
Awesome, thank you. That makes sense.
Yeah, Erin, did you have a question?
Yeah, I had a couple questions actually. Thank you for offering all that info. This APTA physical therapy workforce analysis from 2020 and saw those like broad numbers. And so I'm sure your information will help to make them more specific. But one of the things I saw from that workforce analysis was this supply and demand graph of like the PTs there will be. And I wondered if you had any comment on that. And
Yeah, I
then I
remember this
also
coming up when it first came out. I got tagged a whole bunch in like Facebook groups and on Twitter and such. Um, so like the APTA does really good work for what they do. Um, we have to respect the fact that they're a little bit more kind of PR and academically oriented. And for me, when I'm looking for the cutting edge or leading edge trenders, I look at investors because they've made an entire career, millions upon billions, betting their money in the right direction almost every time. And so when I see those kind of analyses, like what I sense in the data collection and publication analysis and such, is that they're kind of working proactively, but with retrospective data. I don't doubt that there's going to be a little bit of a shakeup in terms of our workforce composition, but at the same time, when I look at the investors out there and how many companies are just pouring money into PT practices, I'm not as kind of fearful. I think 2020 was like a bad report year. I want to say maybe 2018 also had a funny year as well, where they were showing, the supply and demand going to be just be like way too many students in like 5 years or whatever it was at the time. I don't really foresee that as such a large problem. My perspective really comes from more of a industry insider lens, where I haven't seen investors divest from PT entities. And because of that, that tells me that they still expect to make money. So they still expect our profession and our sector of the healthcare industry to grow. In terms of the specifics of that report, I wasn't involved with it. So like, I'm not going to say, good report, bad report. I could just kind of say for what it is for their lens. No different than, some of the reports I personally generate, where it's, I gather data from people willing to share. People willing to share usually buy into culture transparency. People that buy into culture transparency tend to fit into certain, call it cultural and demographic brackets. And so there's going to be a skew of that narrative data as well for the stuff that I release, which is almost my top 1 or 2 lines or bottom 3 or 4 lines in every report we release is, yeah, our data is totally biased because I can't not be. But here they are, and here's your raw data for you to scrutinize for yourself if you'd like. So that's kind of where I see things. I would say if there's any concern, I'm a little bit more concerned about the PTAs, not financially, but because of the perception of it, right? Because their reimbursement is getting cut. But for a lot of states, that's still more profitable than a PT. So I feel like some of that's really a bit more public perception than it really is the financial realities of it. So overall, I would say kind of a turbulent era of our profession overall, and a turbulent era of healthcare, because the pandemic essentially exposed overnight what was and wasn't necessary. Like, did I really need to go into that clinic today? Yeah, we could just do this right now, right? Just charge this. So I think that's really what we're seeing. I think we're going to see a lot more data driven and population health driven payment schemes, as well as scrutinization of perhaps individual clinicians on how good they truly are to groups and populations of folks. So that's kind of like my overall commentary on that one.
with that last little part, do you think that that scrutinization is increased or amped up with the cash-based business versus one that takes insurance? Like that
Well, it's hard to
more,
scrutinize cash pay, like true cash pay, because there's no real publication or tracking of data, right? Like the data is yours and the data is the patient's. For insurance and certainly for CMS, yeah, that's very much trackable. And that has always been like the philosophy of use when it came to Medicare doing their G codes, and then PQRS, MID, these like various like billing data collection incentivization stuff. I think really what you'll see more is the larger payer groups are going to get scrutinized first because it's easier. Right. And then what will happen is we can use that as a use case. Like if I'm a regulator, I'd use that as a use case to be like, look, these 1,000 clinics have done it this way and they're doing yay or nay, depending on the situation. So now I'm going to implement that as policy for everybody and measure the financials before and after, with not necessarily any regard for what the smaller person is or isn't able to do. That's a whole nother talk in terms of like banding together. But I think that's what you can more or less expect. And A lot of that then ties into like public data registries, the EMR you're using, and what you're choosing to measure. Because for whatever reason, even in 2022, it can be a debate of whether I take vitals on a patient or not, which to me, again, is rather insane. I'm biased because I come from a cardiorespiratory background, but you know, it's just one of those things.
Cool. Thank you.
Yep. Not a problem.
I had a question. Looking for a job, would it be intelligent to start out as a travel physical therapist or start out at a standardized clinic?
Well, Carson, I think really that has more to do with what you want out of a job. So, you know, a travel gig isn't a bad deal. You know, it's actually a really good deal because there's a portion of your pay stipended out, so it's not taxed, and the portion that is taxed. And so, if you're able to live under the standard of what you are being contracted for, you're making money on the fact that you're living wherever your travel assignment is. So, you know, as a new grad, now's the time to do it. You know, and honestly, I haven't met many travel new grads that are bad in clinic or bad in the hospital. Many times the travel job is usually more of an obscure location and sometimes a little bit more of an obscure setting. Like there's some travel gigs out in my direction that are state prison clinics paying like $90 an hour. So we have people that will rent out, you know, residents in there a couple times, you know, a week and drive out from my neck of the woods 2 hours to that location and then work those hours. They'll take as many hours as you can give them. So you'll have 12-hour days making $90 an hour, you know, 3 days in a row, and then you sleep for a week, right? And then you do that again. That's your choice, right? If that's the kind of life you want to live, bar the fact that you may or may not get any kind of clinical camaraderie or mentorship. So again, that's on you, right? That's how you feel about who you are and how you want to work. In terms of securing a job at all, again, it's a talent force market right now in the job market. So I think you're going to get a job pretty much wherever you're looking for it, insofar that you're savvy in the interview, right? Like, and this is like a very grand scheme. Like there's a job waiting for you somewhere. The question again is, do you want that job?
Yeah, I did travel therapy right out of school. I graduated and I just hit the road. I was in the middle of nowhere, Texas, at a skilled nursing facility for 3 months. Then I went out to Honolulu, Hawaii for 5 months, and then back to Asheville, North Carolina for about 3 or 4 months before I eventually settled down, got married, et cetera, et cetera. But the money was phenomenal. You know, I think I was just confident enough in my skills that I didn't care if I had mentorship or not. I didn't for the first one in the skilled nursing facility. I did in Hawaii. I had about 10 days of drive along for home health. That was really cool. And then I did as well when I got home health in Asheville. So again, like Dr. Fung said, it's just a matter of how confident you are in your skills and just going out on your own little island and learning as you go, being adventurous and going for it. You know, one of the other things too that I would say, you know, with travel physical therapy is, you know, it's only 13 weeks usually. Most contracts are 13 weeks and it flies by. If you don't like it, get the heck out and go somewhere else next. If you do like it, you can extend. Like Hawaii, I extended to about 5 months. But 13 weeks flies by. So try it. If you don't like it, find another location, line it up for the next one.
But for the salary negotiation part, coming out as a new grad, would I need to push a little harder or kind of roll with the punches being a new grad?
No, you can command or ask your recruiter either where you want to go by location, what kind of setting or practice you want to work in, or the amount of pay that you want. You can't always get all three, but you can usually get 1, 2 of them. You know, like sometimes you can get all three, but if you want a high paying job in, you know, Missouri, you can probably find that. If you want only outpatient and you want high paying, you know, you may have to go to like rural Idaho or something like that, right? It's available. There's a ton of places available. You just have to be a little flexible. So it depends, you know, what's more important to you, making more money or, you know, where you are or the setting. So you got to have a little give and take there, but it's available. The positions are available.
Okay. Thank you.
What else?
I had
I have
a
a quick question following that. Did you have like certain certifications or anything? Did you specialize in anything to make you like a better candidate in travel therapy, or did you just went straight after graduation, right? I heard you correctly.
Yeah, I didn't have
Yeah.
any specialties. I didn't even have a DPT at the time. I was an MPT. And I think it's like Ben said, it's just being confident on the interviews, right? Especially with travel interviews. They're very short. They're usually over the phone. They just want to make sure that you've got a pulse, a license, and like you're a pretty good person. You know, like they're not looking for too much. It's usually they're in a pinch when they need a traveler, either a maternity leave or you know, somebody just quit real quick, or, you know, retirement, and they're looking for somebody to replace it. In the interim, they need somebody to work, or they're just completely understaffed and they just need help, you know? So I was an English major in undergrad. So it was a really, I don't know, it was easy for me to just kind of schmooze on interviews. You know, I just kind of had a fireside chat with the person, you know, or like coffee talk, you know, and just really got to know them, you know, kind of turned it back on them a little, asked a little bit about them and their culture and the business, et cetera. And just really, as long as you're personable and, you know, feel confident and own that confidence, you know, it shouldn't be a problem as far as getting the positions that you want. But yeah, I had no specialties other than, like I said, an English degree background. So it's all about the confidence, man. Just have that confidence and go for it.
Well, thank you. Real quick though, one last thing. Is there like any recruiters that you like would steer away from, or did you have a good experience with another recruiter? Because I know there's a lot out there.
Yeah, I mean, do you have any recommendations, Ben? I know I just used
I
one.
don't honestly. You can get you asked the right question. It's not about the recruiting company, it's about the individual recruiter. And a lot of places are doing that now, where they're even using the HR representative to do the negotiations in lieu, so that you don't have a weird kind of atrocious start with your direct supervisor for the salary negotiation. And you just be very factual about it. Like, you know, I really can't take this job for anything less than $48 an hour. You know, like just very, very factual. You know, I'd love to. Let me know what they say. Like, just super factual. You don't have to feel guilty or about it at all. But I don't have any direct, you know, recommendations or steer clear froms. I think a lot of that you need to suss out just over the phone with the recruiter. There's a lot of recruiting companies out there. They're all going after the same pocket of people, so you can be choosy.
Yeah. CSM is actually a great place to go and interview a bunch of them and just pick and choose. You'll get free handouts from all of them. You know, I had a really good experience with Arias, and they're one of the larger companies. I just had a great recruiter who never left. One of the big issues is turnover with those recruiters. It's a tough job, and if it's not going well or they don't like the company, they'll leave. And, you know, you don't want to start with a recruiter and then have them leave and have to find another recruiter for your next one and another recruiter for next one. Recruiter turnover is probably the biggest thing. And I didn't have any issues with Arias. And, you know, on top of that, every company out there is going to give you a referral bonus if you refer people to their company. So, you know, I always just refer to that one company and that one company only, just because that's my personal experience. There's other companies out there that are great. But Arias has been doing it for quite some time. They've got PT, OT, speech and nursing. You know, they're one of the leaders, I think, in travel therapy. So that's my go-to, but it's only based personally on my experience.
Thank you so much.
Yeah.
I had a quick question. Earlier, in response to Aaron's question, you mentioned, you know, look at the investors, you know, follow what they're doing. And then to that, I just questioned, like, who should we be paying attention to? What company should we be following in that aspect?
So what you want to do is you want to follow like economic journals and investor journals. Look specifically for private equity. There's a lot of firms out there and they constantly buy each other up. So there's no like single person you want to look at, unfortunately, because that's just how that world works. Like, so often you'll have one private equity company build up a portfolio only to sell it to another private equity company. So really what you want to do is go onto your mobile browser and just start searching for private equity physical therapy. and just open up like a million tabs. Okay. Let that sink into the cookies. And then I promise you within a week or so, get nothing but those articles. And that's honestly one of the ways I will have that, and just these articles will pop up and pop up and pop up. I'm also subscribed to some of their newsletters so I can get a feel for them. And then you just kind of keep your ear to the ground on some of these areas, because people will make a splash. Like one group right now that's making a huge splash is Get Luna. Luna is kind of like a mobile dispatch, outpatient at home type circumstance right now, where they kind of crowdsource clinicians, and you hear very, very happy things from their clinicians, but it's also a young entity. So I don't feel like it's been fully proven, but it's making its rounds very, 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 in a very big splash way, kind of the way physical was maybe 3 or 4 years ago, where just like franchises were popping up left and right and everywhere else. Not too different from maybe 5 years before that, where Fox Rehab was like all over the Eastern Seaboard area, and so on. So that's kind of the way I tell people to do that. And the other thing too is these kind of folks tend to cluster together at certain conferences. So PPS is one of the bigger ones. Is you can go there. You can look at is that's the National Association of Rehab Agencies and Providers. And then WebPT sponsors their own big conference called Ascend or Ascent or something like that. And they invite all of their biggest clients and those kind of folks over. So it's a whole thing. Like, it's just that world gets smaller and smaller and smaller the more time you spend time there. And you'll hear about ones that are good, and you'll hear about ones that are bad. Bad tend to get some notoriety, and then they end up in the news in a very unfavorable way, like 3 years later. Like clockwork.
Yeah, I'm thinking about Health South, ATI, some of those big names that we went through in the physical therapy world back in the day. When I was in my final clinical rotation at Health South was when the CEO ended up getting busted for fraud. He was taking helicopter rides everywhere and, doing those unethical things that Ben talked about you want to try to avoid.
More questions.
The flood the computer with cookies idea. That is genius, though. I didn't even realize I'm doing that already.
Well, I mean, everything is tracked. I mean, that dips into the whole like tech marketing side of what I do every day, but and you can do that for various accounts too. So like, I highly encourage you guys to create surrogate accounts for yourself based on interest. So like I have several Google accounts for personal, professional, and side interest views, and I'll sign in and out of my Google Chrome browser because I want to know what they want to recommend, right? Like, I don't mind them tracking me because there's 3 different me's online. So who am I? Like it could be any one of these guys in the multiverse. And everything's already tracked anyway. Like, I'm not too terribly paranoid about that. And if you are, then to quote Elon Musk, use Signal. Otherwise, that's one of the better ways I know of to be able to see there, because everything out there, these web crawlers and their algorithms having a vested interest in showing you what you actually want.
So you mentioned the Great Resignation, and I just heard that term for the first time last week. So I raised my hand, but I'm, just learned it, and I kind of didn't understand what your point was about it. I thought you were going to say like that it's a good time to negotiate because of this, and is that the kind of the main message?
Yeah. Okay. Yeah, it's a workforce market right now. Like, there are more jobs to be filled than there are applicants. More people are leaving their work or quitting their profession of choice than ever before. And it's mostly Gen Z and baby boomers that are doing this. The millennial, like the geriatric millennials, like myself, as well as all the other, spectrums in between. It's funny because those that are kind of like reverse ageist talk about millennials as if they're still like tweens, but most of us are like pretty much 40 and have kids and a mortgage and that kind of stuff. So it's really weird. There's that weird perception. But bar that, yes, it's a good time to negotiate. It's a good time to ask for things. It's a good time to force employers to rethink what they've been doing, because are they doing it in the way that's most optimum, or just because that's the way that's always been done? And there's things that we're building in the background to help support that on both sides, because it's required, in order to really stabilize the industry and the job market at large. So yeah, now's a great time to find a place that you want to hang your hat on, and ask in a confident, not aggressive, just a confident way of like, hey, this is what I need. This is what I need to be able to fully invest in you. That way you can fully invest in me, and we can make this thing work really well. Right? Because that's really the message of the negotiation process. It's not so much like it's not you scratch my back, I scratch yours. Is how much are you going to allow me to invest in you? Right? Because if you underpay me, I'm going to have to find per diem work elsewhere. That's just a fact of it. And it's not insulting, because the employers have been through this, going through this now. They can't keep anybody because they haven't found the right pattern of the compensation package or the onboarding sequence or the culture of the organization to actually keep people, right? And there's typically 6 dimensions of compensation you should think about. So there's the salary, the benefits, the perks, there's the upward mobility or the opportunity in that organization, there's the culture, and the work-life balance. A lot of times the work-life balance crosses over into the culture of how much is that stress being placed on you and how much of that follow you home. So much of that is a top-down problem. It starts from the office of the CEO and trickles all the way, regardless of how small that operation is. Yeah, it's a good time to ask.
One of the things too, I just wanted to bring up and mention real quick, Ben, was something that you had taught me years ago when we first met. Was and this was a tougher market back then, but what are some of the things that make you stand out, amongst all the other PTs? And it's not necessarily CEUs or certifications or specializations, but what's something you can bring to the company that may be a skill that's maybe outside of physical therapy a little bit, And I know a big one for me was learning lead generation and Facebook ads and Google ads. I didn't know how to do that stuff. I had to literally take courses just to learn that stuff. But once I had that stuff and I learned it, right, I could then offer those services to that company as a way for me to kind of show my value above and beyond just like, hey, I can make you some money as a PT, And there were a lot of little like tricks of the trade that you could bolster outside of the world of physical therapy and learn, and just thinking of other outside the box ways to help that clinic or bring in new patients or whatever it may be, something that just makes you stand out just a little bit that you can kind of put on your resume or make as a talking point during an interview is super helpful when you're looking to start those negotiations and ask for a few thousand more because you can do this and it's going to bring in extra revenue or something.
Yeah, I'd like to add on that too is consider, this is something here in the marketing world a lot, consider your unique value proposition. That's probably best quoted from Alexander Osterwalder's business canvas model. He's like a Danish, I think, kind of a super business whiz. And he described the unique value proposition, I quote it to this day, as the job to be done, the gain that you can make, and the pain that you can kill. And that can be the way you convey your value to a patient, and that can be the way you convey your value to an employer, and that can be the way you convey your value to, say, a payer. That's actually one of the ways that I kind of like call it like a life tile, like from the game of life. One of like my earlier career achievements was I was able to negotiate up an insurance contract the first management job that I was at, because the nurse, insurance case manager, insurance adjuster, she kind of had these multiple roles. She was just super salty, like so salty about everything. And I was like, what's the deal? Like you can't be mad at the world, right? It can't be the whole world. Everybody loves ice cream, right? Like, come on, so give me something. And it just turned out that she was getting ridden on by her boss because her utilization dashboard was always in the red. Every single contract that she was in charge of was seeing patients for too long a time. And I was like, that's it? to give them more intense therapies combined with the 3 primary disciplines, we're at a time, get them discharged early enough and safely enough, call it 80% success rate, if you're able to boost my per visit by $60. And she goes, done. So we did it. And so everybody like just magically was just shy of, reasonably and clinically safe of her kind of red line. And we got paid way better for it. And the clinicians were super happy because they didn't have to rush from patient to patient. They got to really intensify inpatient therapies on those particular patients. And it was just the way we were able to kind of logistically manage our caseload at that time. So think about, what is the job that really needs to be done? Many times it is, have a license, have a heartbeat, see some patients, bill properly. But then the gains that you can make and the pains that you can kill, those are themes that you'll see in some of those student resource articles that I linked. A great way to go about it is you ask your interviewer, they always ask you, so do you have any questions for us, right? And then and there's a whole philosophy there as well. But one of my favorite replies to that is, yeah, I have a question. What does success look like for you in this company and for this prospective role? You define success for me. And then gave you all the answers right. And if they don't have the answers, it's amazing to watch that hiring manager, like their gears just suddenly like stall. And they're like, oh my God, I thought about that yet. Right. And that, again, what you'll do for somebody, you'll do to them. If you're willing to challenge them at a deeper strategic level, you're willing to contribute at a deeper strategic level. Pain right now with weird hours. Nobody wants to work weird hours. And you may not want to work weird hours forever, but maybe that's your way in to get this particular role and then transition to another one. There's all sorts of ways around it. So much of this is just being a good human, like just trying to like just connecting authentically and sussing out, what opportunities and people you want to work for and don't want to work for and with, because again, you're going to spend a lot of hours of your
Uh-oh. Do we lose him?
Yeah. It's been a bit shaky for me for a little while.
Yeah. I feel like a bobblehead over here. I'm just like agreeing with everything he says because it's so true. So hopefully we'll get him back here and we'll wrap for the night.
Yeah, definitely. I had a question though, man. I mean, you could definitely answer. You guys talked on the non-compete, so that's presented to us. Do we just like ignore it? Just say, "Oh, that goes against what we believe in."
Well, I would definitely take it and ask if you can review it. Have them hand you the non-compete literature. Take it home and either have a friend, a family friend, or if you know somebody who's a lawyer, have them look it over and see how airtight it is. Like I said, it's very hard to enforce those in a clinical sense because again, nothing that we do is proprietary. So it is hard to enforce those in the clinical world. People try, and the main thing is, look, again, it comes back to just being a good human and a good person. They don't want you stealing their patients and taking your patient load with you. So if you want to leave them and start your own business down the street, that's fine. You probably just can't take your client list with you, right? And if you were to start from scratch, it would probably be pretty hard to come down on you for that. But again, I would run it by a lawyer first and have them take a look at it and see how airtight it was. And then again, even if, let's say it's an outpatient facility and you have a 1-year non-compete beyond that, right? Well, then go do home health for a year and let it lapse. If you're really that concerned about it and the lawyer says, yeah, you can't get out of this one, man. All right, then, again, go do something different for a year to get you off of that non-compete and then boom, start whatever you want to do after that. Sorry, Ben, we lost you there for a minute.
No, all of a sudden I saw every face freeze except for mine. And I was like, oh, that means it's me.
Yep, you're the guy.
I have a question before we're going to wrap up soon. You were discussing in regards to like taking a job that's like late hours and stuff like that. And since this is the negotiation, what if we do accept a job like that? we take a job, late hours, we don't really want to do the late hours or the odd hours. And we're in there 3 months and we know that what we're putting out is good work and we're doing, we're making impacts on our patients. How do we negotiate getting different hours or different pay? Like, how do we go about that at that point after the 3 months, after set amount of time?
3 months is a good time. That's why I also mentioned the probationary period. A lot of times you have like a 60 or 90-day probationary period, and then you can readjust your rates. And then usually on like the annual appraisal, which is something that I actually advocate against, but that's the standard now. We're trying to change it. But to be blunt, you ask, and you ask nicely. And you can go across something like this, like, hey, boss person, man, I've been picking up so many late hours into the night for this work comp population in this contract that you previously struggled to fulfill. And I'm really happy to fill this role. But I got to tell you that I'm also struggling a little bit on my household finances because being in this position means that there are other things that stack up at the other end of my day. And I know that's not your problem, but it would be helpful, if this is something that's favorable to you, maybe there's a way to create a differential pay for these particular hours, because it seems to be a struggle that you've had over time. And I don't want to leave you in a hole. I don't want to leave my patients in a hole downstream, and I'm nowhere near it. But I thought that in all transparency and fairness, because you were willing to, take me on and, take the risk on me, I wanted to let you know where I'm at so that just in case the stars misalign, we both can make proper plans. I don't want it to. I want to be here for you. I want to be here for these patients. I want to help you fulfill these contracts. What do you think? Right, and then they can take it from there. That's one tactic of very, very many. Say you don't want these hours, then what you need to do is start looking around at the kind of the entire operation and be like, okay, well, what hours do you want, right? And are those hours meaningful to the operation? Can you get more patients in those hours because you're going to have to offset something? Or why do those late hours exist to begin with? Like, was it because of a contract? Or, are those flexible? Can you get more people maybe in early? Like, there's a lot of different ways to go about it. And again, it goes back to that unique value proposition is, why do those hours even exist, right? Like, if you got in there and that's not even the job, it's just that like for some reason some boss decided that needed to exist, then you can actually question that service line a little bit and say, hey, look, I think I can make you more money if you allow me to work, say, 4 10-hour days, right? I can get a little bit of the windows of the early and the late hours. I'll take an entire day off. It doesn't even have to be a Monday or Friday, right? And like, that's another opportunity for you to work on your own gig too. That being said, that's a way to have that conversation. It just has to have that meaningful value to them as well, as much as it is yours. And it's not hard to bridge that gap when you start thinking about it through that perspective.
All right, perfect. Thank you.
Yeah, I think the other aspect is transparency. You can be transparent up front too and say, hey, look, I'll take these late hours for 3 months or so, but then I think we need to reassess at the end of those 3 months and see how it's going. I don't want to fully commit to this yet, but I'll give it a try for 3 months. And as long as we can meet and talk about how it's going and see if it's something I can do long term or if it's, not going to work for me. So that, again, transparency is everything. So if you come correct right at the front, they know they're on the same page and they know that, hey, we have a 3-month period to see if this is going to work or not,
Right. Thank you.
Oh, don't be afraid to fail them out. I mean, that's something I've been like, we take on a lot of, we call it executive business development at UpDocs. It's basically consulting, but we have a very focused view of it. So we don't do a full spectrum consulting the way like Bain and Company or McKinsey would do it. We very much focus on the executive C-suite and the executive advisory board type behaviors. And one thing we've been telling them as well is be fantastically choosy about who you interview, how you interview them, and how you onboard them. Similarly, we've been telling the talent, be fantastically choosy about who you apply for, how you interview, and why you say yes. Right? Because the mismanagement of that and the disconnect, that leads to all sorts of turnover. That's money lost for everybody. Right? It's time you're between jobs. It's time they have to plug those holes. Travel therapy is exceptionally expensive. It's like twice sometimes salary rate as an overall cost. And so, these entities can't afford to plug these holes kind of like whack-a-mole They want more of a long-term solution, or at least a cyclical solution is actually the new philosophy. So it's very okay to be open about it. And, you know, if they prove themselves they're not worth your time, then don't give them your time, right? And that's the same thing we've been telling employers a lot is there are so many employees out there that fly under the radar very much purposely because they know they'll be exposed, right? They know that they're not as good of a clinician, but they're 18 years in. How can they not be good, right? And so how do we make that opportunity for them to, you know, performance up to where they should be, or maybe performance out to a more compatible setting and specialty? Those are difficult discussions, right? But they're also for the benefit of the patient population as a whole, which really reflects on our industry as a whole.
Well put. Any other questions before we call it an evening?
Oh, I had a question.
Mm-hmm.
So, first of all, I just wanted to take the time out to say thank you to you two gentlemen for sharing this knowledge with us. But I had a question regarding like, would you guys encourage like shopping around after, well, not necessarily shopping around, but looking for a new job after, let's say, about 6 to 8 months? Would you guys see that as more beneficial or detrimental as opposed to going to like the traditional route where you stay with the same company for X amount of time and you basically like depend or rely on getting a salary bump? Would you guys rather, like, instead of going from job to job looking for a higher paying job, or would you guys encourage just staying with the same company long term?
I knew you were going to have a link for that, Ben, because I already know what the data is showing. I know what my journey was, and I know what the data is showing, so have at it.
That's so funny. It's all like, I'm giving this one away. To be frank, look at the link. The title says that employees that stay for 2 years or longer at an employer consecutively for 2 years or longer tend to make 50% less over the lifetime of their career. That is very, very true. Now, that doesn't mean I'm telling you, hey, every 2 years, quit. I'm saying there needs to be a change, right? Because there has to be growth. And often, that's either not made available or that's not taken. And I can tell you, it took me about 2 years to get promoted. It took me about a year and change after that to take on like a larger management role. And then it took me just under a year after that to take a very significant pay raise. So looking around is fine, you know, and gone is a day where you have to stay with an employer for like 10 years to be considered loyal. I want to say the average burnout type turnover rate right now that I'm getting from recruiters is 9 to 15 months for new grads, which is not very long at all. It's scary to me to think that there are new grads out there that are turning over every 6 to 9 months, because I can only expect how much of an overall burnout feeling that is just on the profession at large. So, you know, looking around, there's no problem with that. You know, switching every year or two, also not a problem with that. There's actually private practitioners that I've been talking with and consulting with that are trying to find ways to just keep that as a norm. Like, I'm going to have new employees turn over every 1 to 2 years, but I'm going to have a very special compensation package and circumstance here to continue that revolving door, so I don't have these big holes that I'm otherwise experiencing with the philosophy of like keeping people 5 to 8 years. So there's nothing wrong with that. Financially, you have a lot to gain to laterally transfer and then the transfer upward. And it's not necessarily considered good or bad etiquette anymore. You know, there's certainly entities that will look at that and be like, forget this, you know, they're a job hopper. Fine. Good luck finding people, right? Like, it's okay. That's their problem, not yours. You know, and for those that are confident enough that are holding on to people, awesome. Sadly, you know, there's like through the pandemic, there was Scott, you mentioned it, right? Like, don't take all the clients away and move down the street. We had somebody in our portfolio when they finally were transitioning off service, they had a surprise resignation, and sure enough, took like half the clientele with them. And it was a big surprise because this was like one of their most loyal employees. So it can happen. It's not necessarily advocated for because it's not necessarily good for the profession at large, but that's part of the reality. You know, I think that's why the transparency piece is so important. Is this data is very, very public, and it's been replicated over and over and over. This is what, data 2014. So this stuff is almost 10 years old. It has been repeatedly validated. So there really has a lot to gain between employers and employees, between managers and the workforce, to really openly converse as to what are we actually working with? Like, what's the total sum possible gain that this organization can make for ourselves and for the people we serve? And then from there, how do we craft a sustainable ecosystem so that if there are weird economic turns, that the entire organization doesn't fold, but we also don't underpay our workforce. We keep safety nets for them in their own households as much as we keep a safety net for this kind of company household.
Yeah, and I'll just add to that. I mean, I personally jumped up job to job every 2 or 3 years, and it was 1,000% just for salary increases because I had $140,000 worth of student loan debt. And I was, well, at the time it was 110, I think, but I was in an EDD program that I didn't even know if I wanted to use or not. And, you know, so I just kept bumping up, moving from job to job to increase that salary so that my student loans were going to be covered when it came time. That being said, I've reframed, you know, after working with people like Ben and like, you know, a lot of good mentors and people in the business world, I've learned that as long as you leverage your degree and your knowledge and your skill set, you can do whatever the heck you want, right? So there's nothing wrong with working a job that you really like, and maybe the pay's not great, but it's good enough to cover the bills, right? And then you start a side hustle or a side gig where you really lean into your passion, and that's where you try to make a little extra money to create that difference in where your salary should be or where you want it to be, right? So you can create whatever you want, or you can go out and just do the whole thing and leave the job market eventually and do your own thing and make that, you know, your salary. It all works. It just depends on what you're looking for. And Aaron had a funny question, I think. It was, you know, does our profession have a branding problem? I think that's an ongoing issue that's been there for years. I think the general public doesn't know what PT does. I think they don't know what the letters after our name mean. You know, we've had a branding problem, and I don't know what the answer is other than you do you and educate the heck out of everybody. Do the best you can educating them, you know, one at a time. I don't really know that we know the answer to it yet.
It definitely does. I mean, it has more of a branding problem in the United States, I feel, than anywhere else because we decided to take on our own name. You know, it's kind of like the metric and the imperial system. Like there's a whole problem. Like everywhere else, we're physios. Here we're physical therapists. So now you have, you know, PT as personal trainer. You have PT as physical therapist. You have PT as physical training. There's a lot of stuff there, you know. And I'll echo, like, I don't think there's like an overarching branding solution per se. I think the profession is so well established that it is going to be what it is. I feel that it is growing though. Like there's a whole blog article we released a while back, PT on TV, like all the various major outlets and movies and shows that physical therapy has been somehow unfolded on. And sometimes it's not in the most favorable light. Other times it's actually not too bad. You know, I was like, oh wow, okay. You know, like I think New Amsterdam, like, you know, had a physical therapist, and it was like a ED doc was dating the doctor of physical therapy, and it was like a whole thing. It wasn't like professionally oriented, but the fact that they made those labels available, I was like, sweet, you know, that's +1 for me. You know, like I don't care that it wasn't like clinically applicable. Like just the fact that you're willing to acknowledge that was amazing. You know, and People Magazine all the time now, there's celebrities mentioning PT more from like a luxury standpoint, because they probably retain a clinician. Yeah.
Joe Burrow, the quarterback from the Bengals, after they won the AFC Championship, just gave thanks to his therapist for working, you know, together for months and months to get him back to the championship game and championship form. So, love those PT shout outs.
Yeah, so they really are there, and certainly there's going to be those that think that all we do is work with, say, you know, geriatrics and bat balloons around, or do like heavy lifts with the bariatrics and the acute care. But those are all snapshots. You know, I think the best way to be a good brand representative of your profession is to live that life. And recently, I'll give you an example for myself. I used to study a lot of martial arts, and just because of the pandemic and just moving across town, that kind of stuff, just taking that opportunity away from me. So what I've transitioned into is a backpack fitness kind of cult following called Go Ruck. And it's modeled after military special operations of U.S. heritage. And so I joined this rucking club where you basically just torture yourself with all these different exercises. And what was hilarious to me was after the last 3-hour WOD that we did, one of the people was like, "All right, when's the physical therapy session start?" And I was like, "And I'm gonna duck out, whoosh, I'm out of here. I don't need to be trapped into that one." But the fact was, they knew it was there for them. They knew to feel better after I've made myself feel worse, I need to see a physical therapist. So that awareness does exist, and it's definitely improving. I just think that chiropractic, yes, and yeah, chiro is all about marketing because they have to be. Just the same with dentistry. Because they're standalone professions. We have ridden on the coattails of referral sources for way, way, way too long, where you'll hear even the greatest PT minds, the business minds out there, where are your referral sources? And to me, a referral source is just one lead source, right? Somebody is telling somebody else to come to me, and that is only one behavior of human, of human buying psychology versus maybe them searching online. Maybe them looking on an app, maybe them driving down the street, maybe them looking for reviews. Those are all different ways to go about it. There's a lot of rabbit holes that we can dive into. The branding debate is, I think, as old as time. And I think part of it too is because we do so much, right? The brand of outpatient orthopedics is very different than the brand of outpatient geriatrics. The brand of inpatient neuro is very different than the brand of outpatient neuro. The brand of acute care is very different from the brand of, say, home health. There's similarities, certainly, and I think the more savvy clinicians can transplant their skills no matter what. I certainly did. I don't consider myself the best outpatient clinician ever. In fact, I would say I'm probably on the lower set of average. Just don't let me treat you. But if I see you in a hospital or in a critical response incident, I promise you I will keep you alive as best as I can, because I will. And I know that space very, very well. And that's just, it's a different type of mindset and skill set, and you'll find yourself kind of honed into some of those inclinations, and that's a good thing.
Well, Ben, I want to be mindful of your time. I appreciate you coming on to be the first official guest speaker for the Business and Entrepreneur and Private Practice Student Special Interest Group. Always good to see you, man.
Likewise, and honestly, I'm really proud of this group. Just kudos to you guys, because I wouldn't have been caught dead in something like this. I say this every student talk I give, I drop that line because I really am proud of y'all. It's when I was in PT school, it was wake up, go to school in my pajamas, sleep through class, hopefully ace my tests, go home, take a nap, wake up, go to the library, study until I can't stay awake anymore, and repeat the process. On the weekends, I would drive down from Inland Empire, Los Angeles, down to San Diego, and I would surf on Saturdays, nap all Sunday, and then drive back to school and repeat the process. I didn't care about advocacy. I didn't care about career path. All I cared about was finishing school, passing the boards, getting the license, and just working, which is really myopic. I feel like that has been a quintessential problem of the contemporary state of education is students are not told or given the tools of how to prepare for that next step. So you guys being here is a huge deal. The stuff that we're covering tonight, would have changed everything for me. And for my first job, my second job, my third job, and so on. And dips into things that I probably wish I knew starting multiple companies, and going down that route. So again, it speaks to the fact that you guys are on a lot more sure and higher level footing than I was. I'll just speak for me, than I was.
Me too.
And kudos to you for it. I think there's a lot of cumulative gain and exposure that you're going to benefit from. And so keep it going, grow the movement, grow the group, and grow each other. That's one of the last things I hope that anything turns into in this group or any other group is you're not each other's competitors. For some reason, that becomes like this weird like poison pawn that's put into the group at some point in almost every program I've seen, is now you're competitors, and you really, really aren't. Especially when, I want to say, Hadi Janinga might be one of the ones that are more famous for saying this about like the 90-10 problem, where 90% of people that can qualify for an outpatient visit for physical therapy don't ever go in and have that visit. So it speaks to, I think Aaron, it was the market report that you're referring to, of there's actually a whole bunch of people that need our help. They have no clue. They have no clue we exist. They have no clue that they don't have to take certain pharmaceuticals or that they can wean themselves off of it. There's a lot of options there and a lot of value to create, you know, from a human capital standpoint, right? Like how much more productive can society be with healthier individuals, right? Physically and mentally. And that's so very deeply where we can make that impact, right? In our own lives as brand ambassadors, but also in our patient and our clients' lives as they live out their own, you know, respective touch points and ecosystems.
Well put, my friend. Well put. Like I said, always good to see you. I appreciate your time. Look forward to seeing you again soon, man.
Likewise, you guys have fun out there. And, you know, if you need to reach me, I'll drop my email in here. You can always email me there. You can always go to the many websites that I've put on there. I'm not hard to find. Social media messages, usually a little bit more laggy to reply to just because I get a lot of them. So I'm sorry if that's the case. I'm not trying to ghost you. It's just like I'm getting there. A whole bunch of requests I'm trying to push through. So have a good night, guys. Appreciate you having me.
All right. See you guys.
Awesome. Thank you.